The window glass exploded into the apartment like 1,000 murderous diamonds. Elena Condori threw herself to the floor, protecting her face with her calloused hands as shards rained down on the worn linoleum of the kitchen floor. The noise was deafening. Not just the crash of glass shattering, but the deep, guttural groan that came from the floorboards, as if the building itself were screaming in pain. In the center of the destruction, Ximena remained motionless. Her 16 years carried the weight of 1,000 torments, and her dark brown eyes shone with a light that did not belong to this world. Blood dripped from her clenched fists. Her nails had pierced the skin of her palms. The black sweatshirt she wore fluttered as if an invisible storm enveloped her. "I told you they would pay," she muttered in a voice that sounded ancient, filled with a rage that transcended her age. "I told you they would all pay for what they did to me." Elena rose slowly, her knees trembling. She knew that tone. She knew what was coming next. Cracks were already beginning to spread across the apartment walls, thin black lines that branched out like the veins of a dying creature. The crucifix around her neck burned against her skin, while the small offering to Pachamama in her pocket seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. Please," Elena whispered in Spanish, her voice broken with despair. "You're going to expose us. You're going to destroy everything we've built here." Ximena turned to her mother, and Elena saw not her daughter, but something much older and more terrible, something that the earth had created in a moment of ancestral fury. "Let everything be destroyed," said Ximena, her voice echoing like the roar of a distant earthquake. "I'm tired of hiding." Hello, dear listeners of the Jovens Sobrenatures channel. If you're hearing this story for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our disturbing stories. And leave a comment telling us which city you're watching us from. We love to know where you're from. When you finish listening to the whole story, don't forget to give it a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell us what impressed you the most. Now get ready, because Ximena's story is one that will stick in your mind for a long time. My name is Ximena Condori, and for 16 years I believed I was just a Bolivian teenager trying to survive on the narrow streets of Barcelona. But lies have short legs, and the truth about who I really am was about to emerge from the depths of the earth, like lava from a dormant volcano. The apartment where my mother Elena and I live is on the 3rd floor of a rundown building in the Gracia neighborhood. It's just 2 cramped rooms that smell perpetually of cheap detergent and disinfectant, constant reminders of the 3 cleaning jobs my mother works to support us. The walls are paper thin, and I can hear every argument, every cry, every intimate moment of our neighbors. Sometimes I wonder if they can also hear the strange things that happen in our apartment. And strange things always happen. That October morning, I woke up to the familiar sound of my mother getting ready for work. It was 5:30 a.m. Always. 5:30. Elena never varied her routine, as if predictability could somehow protect us from the chaos I carried inside me. I heard her careful footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the closet door where she kept her cleaning uniforms, the low murmur of her morning prayers, always a confusing mix of Catholic Hail Marys and invocations to Pachamama that she thought I didn't understand. I pretended to be asleep when she approached my bed. I felt the weight of her gaze on me, studying my face for signs. Signs of what? I didn't know at the time. I only knew that she always watched me with that expression of fear disguised as maternal love. "Sleep well, Piss," she whispered, kissing my forehead. Her hands trembled slightly. They always trembled when she touched me. After she left, I lay there for another hour, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. They were new. They had appeared during the night. Small, almost imperceptible. But I knew them intimately. Every line, every branch. They always appeared after my nightmares, after the nights when I woke up with my fists clenched and my heart beating like a war drum. School was my own personal hell. Instituto Sant Josep, a red brick building where middle-class Catalan teenagers pretended to be more cosmopolitan than they really were. I was the only Bolivian in a Spanish school, and that difference marked me like a visible scar. Not that I cared. In fact, I cultivated my difference like a weapon. I walked through the hallways wearing my black hoodie with the hood up, my headphones, constantly in my ears playing music I didn't always listen to. It was armor, a way to keep the world at bay. My classmates had learned to avoid me, not because I was physically violent, but because there was something about me that made them uncomfortable. An energy that made the hairs on their arms stand on end when I walked by. Carla Mendoza was my main tormentor. A skinny blonde girl with braces and a desperate need to feel superior to someone. She had chosen me as her favorite target, and her poisonous comments had become the soundtrack of my school life. "Look, the Bolivian witch is here," she said that particular morning as I walked into history class. Her friends laughed, that kind of forced laugh teenagers use when they want to seem cruel but are too cowardly to take responsibility. I sat down at my usual desk at the back of the room, near the window. I liked to watch the sky during class. Sometimes, the clouds formed patterns that seemed to speak to me in a language I almost but not quite understood. "Hey, Ximena," Carla turned in her chair, her voice sweet with malice. "Is it true that your mom does magic? My grandmother said that you Bolivians always do weird magic, like voodoo, right?" I felt something warm rise in my chest. It wasn't ordinary anger. It was something more primitive, more visceral. It was as if lava was bubbling in my stomach, looking for a way out. "Leave her alone, Carla," said David, a shy boy who sat in front of me. He always tried to defend me, which only made things worse. "Why do you defend her, David? Are you afraid she'll curse you?" Carla laughed louder, and other voices joined hers. That's when I felt it, the first vibration. It started as an almost imperceptible tremor in the floor beneath my feet, then spread to the legs of my desk. The window pane next to me made a low, musical sound, as if someone were running a wet finger along its edge. "Carla," my voice came out lower than usual, laden with an authority I didn't recognize in myself. "Shut up." She looked at me in surprise. I had never responded to her taunts before. I always remained silent, letting her venom run off me like water off a stone. But something had changed that day. Something had broken inside me. "What did you say?" Carla stood up from her chair, her cheeks flushing with indignation. "You don't tell me what to do, you—" The window glass cracked. It was a thin, almost artistic crack that spread in fractal patterns across the surface. Everyone in the room turned to look, including me. My heart raced. I knew there was a connection, but I didn't understand how or why. "How strange," muttered the teacher, Mr. Valdez, approaching the window. "It must have been the temperature difference." Carla looked at me suspiciously, but before she could say anything, the bell rang and everyone rushed out to recess. I remained seated, staring at the crack in the window. It was beautiful, in a disturbing way. It looked like a map of unknown territories, or perhaps the veins of a giant sleeping creature. During recess, I looked for a secluded spot in the schoolyard. I needed to think, I needed to understand what was happening to me. I sat down under an old olive tree, its thick roots protruding from the concrete around it. I liked that tree. It seemed as out of place as I did, a survivor from ancient times in a modern and hostile world. That's where I heard the voices. They weren't literal voices, but whispers that seemed to come from within the earth itself. They were in Quechua, the language my mother spoke when she thought I wasn't paying attention, the language of my grandparents whom I had supposedly never met. "Sumak nyawi warmi, kunan kuti munki." "Girl with beautiful eyes, now you return." I froze. I looked around, but there was no one else around. The other students were playing soccer or huddled in their exclusive social circles, all ignoring me as usual. But the voices continued, clearer now. "Pachamama wakan kachkan. Finya ke pachapi." Pachamama is waking up. Anger in this world. I touched the ground with my palms. The concrete was hot, too hot for an October day in Barcelona. And beneath the surface heat, I felt something else. A pulsation, like a giant heart beating deep within the earth. That night, Elena came home later than usual. Her uniforms were dirtier than usual, and she carried a different smell. Not just cleaning products, but something older. Sage, perhaps, or copal. "How was school?" I asked, avoiding her gaze as she prepared a simple dinner of quinoa and chicken. Normal, I lied. I always lied to her, just as she always lied to me. Our home was built on a foundation of half-truths and whispered secrets. But that night, as we ate dinner in silence, I watched Elena more closely. I noticed how her hands trembled as she held her fork, how her eyes constantly darted to the walls of the apartment as if she were looking for something, or afraid of finding something. "Mom," I finally said, "what happened the day I was born?" She froze. She literally stopped chewing, the fork suspended in midair between her plate and her mouth. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." Elena put down her fork and looked at me directly for the first time in days. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but there was something else there, a deep, ancient anguish. "You were born on a very cold day in La Paz," she said slowly. "There was a storm, a very strange storm." "Strange how?" She hesitated, playing with the crucifix around her neck. "There were signs. Things the old people would say were omens." "What kind of omens?" "It doesn't matter, mija. They're old superstitions. Nonsense." But I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe it was nonsense. Elena believed every word she was saying, and that scared me more than any truth could. That night, after she went to sleep, I searched the apartment. I knew Elena had secrets, and I had finally decided to find out what they were. At the back of her closet, behind a pile of old sheets, I found a shoebox wrapped in red fabric. Inside the box was a diary. The pages were yellowed and covered with my mother's careful handwriting, but not in Spanish, in Quechua. And in the margins, detailed drawings, patterns of cracks, intricate spirals, symbols that seemed to burn my eyes when I looked at them directly. I managed to translate a few passages. Day 1047. Ximena was 3 years old. She broke all the glasses in the kitchen during a tantrum. She didn't throw them. They just shattered as she screamed. The cracks in the walls formed the symbol of the Amaru serpent. Day 2891. Ximena's first period. The earth shook, small but real. The neighbors thought it was a truck passing by. I knew better. Day 4032. She's getting stronger. The plants on the balcony died during the night, but not from lack of water. From excess energy. Pachamama is restless. I closed the diary with trembling hands. How many days had Elena been documenting my life? And why was she counting the days as if it were a countdown to something terrible? I went back to my bed, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the nighttime sounds of the building. The pipes groaning, the neighbors moving around in their apartments, the distant traffic on the streets of Barcelona. But beneath all those familiar sounds, I heard something else. A pulse, coming from below, from the depths of the earth beneath the building. As if something gigantic was breathing down there, waiting patiently for a signal to awaken. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I tried to pray. But the words that came out of my mouth weren't in Spanish or Catalan. They were in Quechua, a language I supposedly didn't know, but which flowed from me like water from an ancient spring. And somewhere deep in the earth, something answered. The discovery of Elena's diary had opened a wound in my soul that bled unanswered questions. For 3 days, I pretended everything was normal while inside a storm was brewing. I watched my mother with new eyes, every nervous gesture, every furtive glance, every whisper in Quechua that she thought I didn't understand. Our home had become a minefield of unspoken tensions. At school, things got dramatically worse. Carla and her friends had intensified their attacks after the incident with the cracked window. Apparently, my reaction, or lack thereof, had been interpreted as weakness, and predators always smell weakness like sharks smell blood. "Hey, witch," Carla approached me in the hallway between classes. "My cousin said she saw your mother buying black candles at the esoteric shop on Calle del Sol. Is it true that you perform satanic rituals?" I felt that familiar wave of heat rise in my chest, but this time it was more intense, like lava seeking escape through cracks in the rock. The tiles under my feet seemed to vibrate imperceptibly. "Leave me alone, Carla. Or what? Are you going to curse me? She laughed, but I detected a nervousness in her voice. Are you going to make my hair fall out? Are you going to give me pimples? The fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered once, then twice. Other students began to look up, murmuring about problems with the electrical system. Seriously, stop it, said David, appearing at my side. His face was pale and he kept his eyes fixed on the flickering lights. You're scaring everyone. But Carla was far from finished. She moved closer, her voice low and venomous. You know what I think? I think you're just a weird Bolivian girl trying to get attention. I bet your mom taught you some cheap tricks. To impress people, but deep down you're just a... The lights exploded, all at once. A cascade of sparks and glass rained down on our heads as the hallway plunged into darkness. Screams echoed off the walls, and I heard the sound of people running, in panic. Amid the chaos, I stood motionless, feeling an incredible energy coursing through my body like pure electricity. And then I saw it. In the sudden darkness, my eyes caught something that shouldn't have been there. Shadowy shapes moving across the walls, not shadows cast by objects, but entities with a life of their own. They glided across the tiles like liquid smoke. And when they passed close to the other students, I saw them shiver without knowing why. One of the shadows stopped in front of me. It had no definite shape, but I could feel its attention focused on me like the heat of a flame. When it moved, I heard a whisper in Quechua. Warma kunanpacha, kamachi atipaskai kita. Child, it is time. Command your power. The emergency light came on, bathing everything in an ominous red glow. The shadows disappeared instantly, as if they had never existed. Around me, my classmates recovered from the shock, some crying, others laughing nervously. Carla was leaning against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. It was you, she whispered, pointing at me with a trembling finger. I saw it. You did it. Before I could respond, teachers rushed in, concerned about the power outage. They pushed us out of the hallway, talking about a short circuit and problems with the building's old wiring. But I knew the truth. And from the look in her eyes, Carla knew it too. I went home early that day, claiming I had a headache. Elena was still at work, so I had the apartment to myself. I sat on the living room floor, leaning against the wall, trying to process what had happened. The shadows, the voices, the energy that had coursed through my body. It all seemed too real to be imagination. I closed my eyes and tried to focus. I took a deep breath, letting my mind empty of conscious thoughts. And slowly, very slowly, I began to feel it again. The pulsing. It came from below, from the depths of the earth beneath the building. But this time it wasn't just a pulse. It was a complex symphony of vibrations. As if the earth itself were singing an ancient song in a language that transcended words. I pressed my palms against the cold floor. The linoleum was freezing, but beneath it I felt warmth. Warmth and movement. As if currents of energy were flowing through the rock and soil, converging exactly where I was sitting. Sumak warmi, uyari? Beautiful woman, listen. The voice came from within the earth itself, not through my ears, but directly into my mind. And this time I replied, Who are you? Nuka kani Pachamama, mamaiki yachan. I am Pachamama, your mother knows. What do you want from me? Mana munainiki, kanikan, kamachi. It's not what I want, it's what you are. Command. I don't understand. Intindiwanki, sonkoi kipi yachanki. You understand. In your heart, you know. And I knew it. As impossible as it seemed, as much as my rational mind rejected the idea, something deep inside me recognized the truth. I wasn't just a Bolivian teenager trying to survive in Barcelona. I was something more. Something ancient and powerful that had been dormant for 16 years, but was now finally awakening. The sound of keys in the lock snapped me out of my trance. Elena had come home early from work, probably because the school had called about the incident with the light bulbs. I heard her hesitant footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the door slowly opening. Ximena, are you home? I'm in the living room, Mom. She appeared at the door, still wearing her cleaning uniform. But there was something different about her posture, a tension that went beyond her usual exhaustion. Her eyes scanned the apartment quickly, as if looking for signs of disturbance. The school called, she said, approaching cautiously. They said there was an electrical problem. Yes. The lights in the hallway blew out. Elena sat down in the old armchair across from me, her hands clasped in her lap. For a long moment, we sat in silence, two women carrying secrets too heavy to speak. Ximena, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something. Things I should have told you a long time ago. My heart raced. About what? About you. About who you are. About why we came to Barcelona. She stood up and went to the wardrobe, returning with the shoebox I had found days earlier. My eyes widened. I had been careful to put it back in exactly the same place, but Elena obviously knew I had touched it. You found my diary, she said, not as a question, but as a statement. I'm sorry, You don't have to apologize. Maybe it was time you knew. Elena opened the box and took out the diary, its yellowed pages fluttering in her hands. But this time, she also took out other things. Old photographs, a small red cloth bag, and something that made my blood run cold, a piece of black stone covered with engraved symbols. This stone, she said, holding it reverently, came from the temple where you were born. In La Paz, in the mountains, there are places that tourists never see. Places where ancient traditions are still practiced. Places where Pachamama still speaks directly to those who know how to listen. I was born in a temple. You were born during a ritual. I was desperate. The pregnancy wasn't going well. The doctor said I could lose you. A neighbor took me to a curandero, a very old man who knew the ancient ways. Elena paused, her eyes filling with tears. He said you were special, that Pachamama had chosen you to be her instrument in this world, but he also warned that it would be dangerous, that the anger of forgotten ancestors would run through your veins, and that one day I would have to choose between protecting you and protecting the world from you. What kind of instrument? You can feel the earth. You can command it. Make it obey your will. But this power comes at a price. It feeds on your most intense emotions. Anger, mostly. And the more anger you feel, the stronger it grows. Until what? Elena clutched the black stone tighter. Until the line between you and Pachamama disappears completely. Until you are no longer Ximena, but the very fury of the earth made flesh. I felt the ground vibrate slightly beneath my feet. Elena's words echoed in my mind, fitting perfectly with the strange experiences I had had. The broken glass, the flashing lights, the voices whispering in Quechua, it all finally made sense. That's why you brought me to Barcelona, I said, to keep me away from the places of power. I thought distance would work, that growing up in a modern city, far from the sacred mountains, would diminish your connection to Pachamama. For years, it worked. You had small, manageable episodes. I documented everything, looking for patterns, trying to understand. But now it's getting stronger. Much stronger. And I don't know how to protect you anymore. At that moment, as if summoned by our words, I heard the familiar whisper coming from deep within. Mana munan kichu. Kepi kachkani. She can't protect me. I'm here. Elena must have heard it too because her eyes widened in terror. She's talking to you, she whispered. Pachamama is speaking directly to you. She always talks to me, especially when I'm angry. God help us. Elena stood up abruptly and began pacing around the room. Her hands shook violently as she muttered prayers in Spanish and Quechua, alternating between Christian supplications and Andean invocations. There is one person, she said finally, someone who can help, a professor at the university, Dr. Martín Rojas. He is of Bolivian descent, a scholar of Andean traditions. Perhaps he knows how to… Like what? Cure me? Make me normal? Like, teach you how to control it before it's too late. I felt a wave of anger rise in my chest. anger at a lifetime of lies, at the secrets, at the feeling of being treated like a ticking time bomb. What if I don't want to control it? What if I want to be exactly who I am? Cracks appeared instantly on the walls. Thin black lines spread, like lightning radiating out from where I sat. Elena recoiled, her face pale with fear. Ximena, please. No, I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending to be something I'm not. The black stone in Elena's hand began to glow with a faint but noticeable light. And from the depths of the earth, I heard something I had never heard before. Not a whisper, but a roar. The roar of something gigantic and ancient awakening from a millennial slumber. Si warmi finyakui kalpayukke. Yes, woman, anger, be powerful. The apartment windows began to rattle in their frames. Objects on the shelves swayed dangerously. Downstairs, I heard our neighbors screaming in panic. And in that moment, I understood the terrible truth. I wasn't just connected to Pachamama. I was her. Her fury, her pain, her thirst for revenge against a world that had forgotten respect for the earth. And now that I knew who I really was, there was no turning back. The apartment shook one last time, and then everything went silent. But it was the silence before the storm. I could feel Pachamama moving below, preparing, gathering strength, and I prepared myself along with her. The 3 days that followed Elena's revelation were the most intense of my life. The apartment had become a silent battlefield between two opposing forces. My mother, desperate to find a way to save me, and me, finally understanding the power that ran through my veins and feeling less inclined to suppress it. Elena had contacted Dr. Martin Rojas on Monday morning. I listened to the entire phone conversation from my room, her speaking in urgent whispers, alternating between Spanish and Quechua, describing symptoms as if I were a patient in critical condition. The words I could make out sent a chill down my spine: telluric manifestations, uncontrolled ancestral connection, urgent intervention necessary. Meanwhile, at school, the situation had escalated to a whole new level of nightmare. The news about the exploding light bulbs had spread like wildfire, and with it, a distorted version of events that placed my supernatural powers at the center of it all. It was David who told me about the WhatsApp group. Ximena, I need to tell you something, he said, approaching me in the courtyard during Tuesday's recess. His face was red with embarrassment, and he kept his eyes fixed on the ground. There's a group that people have created. About you. I felt that familiar wave of heat rise in my chest, but this time I tried to control it. The potted plants around us were already beginning to wilt, their leaves turning brown at the edges as if they had been burned by an invisible flame. What kind of group? They're calling it Bolivian Witch. Carla started it after the incident, with the lights. She's convincing everyone that you have real powers, but that they're bad. David showed me his phone. The screen displayed a group chat with 23 participants, practically our entire class. My stomach churned as I read the messages. Carla M. I swear I saw her eyes glow when the lights exploded. Ana Santos. My grandmother said people like that exist. They make pacts with demons. Jorge R. Have you noticed how plants die around her? Yesterday, I saw her walk through the garden and the flowers wilted. Carla M. We need to do something before she hurts someone for real. Luis F. I'll bring holy water tomorrow. My cousin said it works. Carla M. Good idea. And coarse salt, too. Let's surround her at recess and see if she disappears like a vampire. My vision turned red, literally red, as if blood were running before my eyes. David's cell phone started to heat up in his hands, so much so that he dropped it on the floor with a cry of pain. Ximena! He exclaimed, waving his burned hands. Are you okay? Your eyes are... They're what? Glowing, like embers. I looked around us. All the potted plants on the patio were now completely dead, not just wilted, but charred, as if they had been struck by lightning. The concrete beneath my feet was cracked in concentric patterns, radiating outward like ripples on a lake. And in the sky, dark clouds were forming, out of nowhere. In a matter of seconds, the sunny day had turned into something ominous and charged with electricity. Finya warmi, rikuchi atipas kaikita. Be angry, woman. Show your power. Pachamama's voice echoed not only in my mind, but seemed to come from the very air around us. David heard it too. I saw in his eyes the exact moment he realized that something far beyond human comprehension was happening. I have to go, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant even to myself. Ximena, wait. But I was already walking toward the school building. With each step, I felt the energy growing inside me like an electric current. The clouds above thickened even more, and I heard the first distant rumble of thunder. It was when I entered the main hallway that I saw them. Carla and 5 of her friends were waiting for me, strategically positioned near the lockers. Each one was carrying something different. Carla had a small bottle of water, presumably holy water. Anna was holding a bag of coarse salt. Marina was wielding a crucifix, and the others had various amulets and objects that were supposed to offer protection against evil. "Look who's here," said Carla, her voice laden with false bravado. "The Bolivian witch herself." I stopped in the middle of the hallway, about 5 feet away from them. I could feel the eyes of other students on us, some curious, others clearly afraid. The air around me seemed to vibrate with a palpable energy. "Carla," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "you have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting our school from you." She opened the bottle of holy water and took a step forward. "I'll give you a chance to confess. Admit that you made a pact with the devil to get these powers, ask God for forgiveness, and maybe we'll leave you alone." I felt something break inside me, not my heart, something much deeper, as if a dam that had been built over 16 years had finally given way under the pressure. "Pact with the devil?" I repeated, and this time my voice echoed with a force that made the windows in the hallway rattle. "Carla, you're even more ignorant than I thought." She threw the holy water at me. The liquid never touched me. Halfway between us, the drops simply evaporated, turning into vapor that rose into the air like incense. The smell of sulfur filled the hallway. "My God," Marina whispered, backing away. "God has nothing to do with this," I said, taking a step forward. The linoleum under my feet began to crack. "This is much older than any god you know." Anna threw coarse salt on the floor between us, creating a white line that was supposed to prevent me from advancing. I laughed, a sound I didn't recognize as my own laughter. "Salt? Seriously?" I stepped over the line of salt. The grains dissolved instantly as if they were sugar touching hot water. The linoleum floor began to bubble and melt around my feet. That's when Marina raised the crucifix. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of this child." The piece of metal in her hands began to glow, not with divine light, but with intense heat. Within seconds, it was so hot that Marina screamed and dropped it. The crucifix hit the floor and shattered like glass. "Don't you understand?" I said, my voice now carrying strange harmonics, as if multiple voices were speaking through me. "I am not possessed by anything. I am something. Something you have forgotten, but that has never ceased to exist." The lights in the hallway began to flicker again, but this time they didn't explode. Instead, their light turned red, bathing everything in a bloody glow. Carla and her friends were now pressed against the wall, their faces pale with terror. Other students had started to run, but found that the hallway doors wouldn't open. Not because they were locked, but because the very structure of the building seemed to have warped slightly, causing the door frames to no longer line up. "Please," whispered Carla, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't know. I'm sorry." And at that moment, seeing her there, a terrified teenager who had taken her ignorance too far, I felt something I hadn't expected. Compassion. The anger that had taken hold of me faltered for a moment. And in that moment of hesitation, I heard a different voice. Not Pachamama this time, but something softer, more human. "Sumak warmi, munekai." Mana chinka chichu. Beautiful woman, beloved. Don't lose yourself. The voice sounded like my grandmother, a woman I had never met, but whose love had somehow crossed generations to reach me at that critical moment. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened them again, the lights were back to normal, the floor had stopped cracking, and the air no longer vibrated with destructive energy. "You're lucky," I said, my voice returning to normal. "Today I learned that I have a choice." I walked over to Carla, who trembled as I approached. But instead of doing anything threatening, I just whispered in her ear, "Next time you want to confront something you don't understand, maybe you should try to understand it first." I left the hallway, leaving them there. But I knew that things had changed irrevocably. There was no longer any way to pretend normality, no way to hide. And honestly, I didn't want to anymore. That afternoon, when Elena came home, she found me sitting in the living room with the black stone in my hands. It had started to glow with a soft light whenever I touched it, and I found that holding the stone helped me maintain some control over the energies flowing through me. "Dr. Rojas wants to see you tomorrow," she said hesitantly. "He said he might be able to help." What if I don't want help? Elena sat down in the armchair across from me, her hands clasped in her lap. "Ximena, what happened at school today?" I told her about the WhatsApp group, about the confrontation with Carla and her friends, about how I had almost completely lost control. Elena listened silently, her face growing paler with every detail. "You could have hurt someone," she said finally. "I could have killed someone," I corrected her. "And that scares me more than it should." "What do you mean?" "Part of me wanted to do it. Part of me wanted to show them exactly what I'm capable of. And that part is getting bigger every day." Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the streets of Barcelona below. "Dr. Rojas said something interesting," she said without turning around. "He said that in Andean traditions, people like you weren't seen as cursed. You were seen as guardians, protectors of the balance between the human world and the natural world." "And what does that mean?" "It means that maybe the problem isn't your powers. Maybe the problem is that you're trying to live in a world that has forgotten why people like you are necessary." That night, I dreamed of mountains. They weren't the mountains of Barcelona, but the Andes of Bolivia. Snow-capped peaks rose toward sea, a sky so blue it hurt to look directly at it. And at the top of the highest mountain, a figure waited for me. It was a woman, ancient, but not old. Her skin was the color of rich earth, and her hair was black as the Andean night. She wore clothes woven with patterns that seemed to tell stories in languages I almost understood. "Ximena," she said, and her voice carried the echo of 1,000 canyons. "Daughter of the earth, your time has come." Time for what? To choose. You can continue trying to be what you are not, living in a world that does not understand you, or you can accept who you really are and find your true purpose. And what is my true purpose? The woman smiled, and when she did, flowers sprouted from the rock around us. The same as it always has been, to protect, to balance, and when necessary, her expression became serious, to purify. Purify what? Those who have forgotten that they are part of the earth, not its owners. Those who take without giving, who destroy without creating, who hate without understanding. I woke up to the sound of distant thunder. Through the window, I saw a storm approaching Barcelona, black clouds laden with lightning that seemed to have come out of nowhere. And deep within the earth, I felt Pachamama stirring. Not with anger this time, but with anticipation. She was waiting for my decision. And I was beginning to understand that perhaps there was only one true choice to make. Dr. Martín Rojas was not what I expected. When Elena and I arrived at his office at the Universitat de Barcelona on Thursday morning, we found a young man, perhaps in his 40s, with clearly Andean features but dressed in a modern suit. His eyes, however, carried a depth that suggested knowledge far older than his appearance. "Ximena," he said in Spanish, but with an accent that betrayed his Bolivian origins. Your mother told me some interesting things about you. His office was a fascinating mix of academia and ancestral traditions. Bookshelves filled with anthropology books shared space with ancient looms, pre-Columbian pottery, and crystals that seemed to vibrate with their own energy. In the center of the table, I recognized it immediately, a black stone identical to the one Elena kept, but this one was much larger and covered with symbols that seemed to move when I didn't look directly at them. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to two chairs in front of his desk. "We need to talk about some very serious things." Elena was visibly nervous, her hands shaking as she sat down. I, on the other hand, felt strangely calm. The large stone on the table seemed to be humming, not an audible sound but a vibration I could feel in my bones. "Dr. Rojas," I began, "my mother said you could help me, but I'm not sure I want help." He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to see beyond the surface. "Interesting. Most people in your situation would be desperate for a cure. You seem more curious about your abilities. Because maybe they're not a disease?" "Exactly." He leaned forward, his hands intertwining on the table. "Ximena, what your mother told you is true, but it's only part of the story. You are not an anomaly or a freak. You are what my people would call Nyaupak Warmi, primordial woman, a bridge between Pachamama and the human world." Elena shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Doctor, are you saying my daughter is normal?" "I'm saying your daughter is extraordinary, and that trying to suppress or cure who she is would be not only impossible but destructive to both her and everyone around her." I felt that familiar wave of heat rise in my chest, but this time it was different. Not anger, but something like relief. Finally, someone who didn't see me as a problem to be solved. "But she's dangerous," Elena insisted. "The things that happen when she gets angry? They're dangerous because she hasn't been taught how to channel her abilities properly," Dr. Rojas interrupted gently. "Imagine a river dammed up for decades finally finding a crack in the levee. The destruction doesn't come from the water itself, but from the uncontrolled way it escapes." He stood up and walked over to a bookcase, pulling out an old leather-bound book. "This book contains records of women like you throughout history. In the Andean tradition, you were revered. You protected entire villages from earthquakes, made the earth produce during droughts, purified places corrupted by violence or greed." "Purified how?" I asked. Dr. Rojas hesitated, exchanging a glance with Elena. "Sometimes through healing, other times through the destruction of that which could not be healed." The words echoed in the office like an omen. Elena paled, but I felt something stir inside me, an understanding that my destructive nature might have a greater purpose. "What if I don't want to be a bridge?" I asked. "What if I just want to be a normal teenager?" "Then you will die." The brutal simplicity of his answer shocked me. "What do you mean?" "Your energies will continue to grow until your human body can no longer contain them. You will literally consume yourself from the inside, and when that happens, the release of energy will be—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Catastrophic." Elena began to cry silently. Dr. Rojas approached her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "But there is hope. I can teach Ximena to channel and control her abilities. I can help her find her true purpose." "And what would that purpose be?" I asked. "That, my dear, you will have to discover for yourself. But I can give you the tools to do so safely." That's when my cell phone vibrated, an Instagram notification. Normally I would have ignored it, but something made me check. It was a photo posted by Carla just a few minutes earlier. The image showed my apartment, photographed from outside with our living room window clearly visible. The caption read, "We found where the Bolivian witch lives. Time for a little visit." Bolivian witch. Time for justice. My blood ran cold, not because of the threat itself, but because I could see in the shadows of the photo that it wasn't just Carla. There were at least 5 or 6 figures hiding among the cars parked on the street. "Elena," I said, showing her my phone, "we need to go home. Now." Dr. Rojas looked at the photo and his face became serious. This isn't good. If they corner her at home, in an altered emotional state, what could happen? Asked Elena. Ximena's telluric energy is directly connected to the foundations of the building where you live. If she loses control completely. He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood. We rushed to Dr. Rojas's car, a 20-minute drive that took us 12. The entire way there, I felt the energy building inside me like pressure in a pressure cooker. The sky had darkened again, heavy clouds forming out of nowhere, and occasional small tremors made the car shake slightly. Ximena, Dr. Rojas said as he drove, I need you to try to stay calm. If you lose control now, No, I replied through clenched teeth. I'm trying. But inside, Pachamama was awakening. I could feel her stretching like a giant cat waking from a nap, her claws extending through the layers of earth. And this time she wasn't just whispering, she was roaring. Finyay Pachakachkan, Ama Harkaichu. It's time for anger. Don't stop me. When we got to my street, the scene was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just 5 or 6 teenagers. There were at least 15 people gathered in front of the building. Some were my schoolmates, but others were older. Parents, apparently, who had been convinced that I posed a real threat. Carla was in the center of the group, holding a megaphone she had gotten from who knows where. We know you're in there, her amplified voice echoed between the buildings. Come out and admit what you are. Admit that you made a pact with the devil. Others shouted as well. Witch! Demon! Get out of our town! Dr. Rojas parked his car a block away. Ximena, listen to me, he said, turning to face me. They're afraid and acting out of ignorance, but if you respond with violence, they came to my house, I interrupted, my voice coming out lower and more dangerous than I intended. They're threatening my family. Yes, and that's terrible, but you have a choice about how to respond. Elena was hyperventilating in the back seat. My God, I knew this was going to happen. We should have left Barcelona years ago. Through the car windows, I could see the crowd growing. Neighbors had come out to see what was happening. Some people were filming with their cell phones. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control. And then I saw something that made my heart stop. One of the people in the crowd was carrying a can of gasoline. They're going to try to set our apartment on fire, I whispered. Dr. Rojas followed my gaze and cursed in Quechua. We need to call the police, Elena said. There's no time, I replied. Besides, what are we going to say? That they're attacking a witch? I felt the first crack form in the asphalt beneath the car, then another. The ground was literally boiling with the energy emanating from me. Warmi kunan ama suyaichu. Woman now, don't wait. Pachamama's voice echoed not only in my mind, but seemed to come from all directions. Dr. Rojas and Elena heard it too. I saw in their faces the exact moment they realized we were way past the point of no return. Ximena, Dr. Rojas said. Urgently, you have a fundamental choice to make right now. You can try to suppress this, fight against your nature, and probably destroy the entire block in the process. Or you can accept who you are and use your power consciously. To do what? To protect your home, to protect your family, to show these people that they are playing with forces they do not understand. The crowd was growing more agitated. Someone had thrown a rock at our apartment window, and I heard the distant sound of glass shattering. That was the last straw. I felt something inside me break. Not break, but open. Like a dark flower finally blooming after 16 years trapped in a bud. I opened the car door. Ximena, no! Elena shouted. But I was already walking toward the crowd. With each step, cracks formed in the asphalt behind me. The trees along the street began to sway without wind. Windows of parked cars began to rattle in their frames. And from far, far below the earth, I heard something I had never heard before. Pachamama was laughing. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the laughter of something ancient and terrible that had finally found a way to express itself in the modern world. When the crowd saw me approaching, the noise gradually subsided until everything was silent. My eyes were shining. I could see their reflection in the terrified faces of the people in front of me. "Do you want to meet the Bolivian witch?" I said, my voice carrying harmonics that made the windows of the surrounding buildings rattle. "Then meet her." And then, for the first time in my life, I stopped fighting what I really was. The earth responded instantly. What happened next will forever be etched in the memory of everyone who was there that day. And for those who weren't, well, cell phone footage spread across the internet in a matter of hours, spawning conspiracy theories that persist to this day. When I stopped fighting my nature, the earth responded like a symphony that had been waiting 16 years for its conductor. The asphalt of the street opened up in perfectly symmetrical lines, creating a complex mandala pattern that radiated out from my feet. These weren't chaotic cracks. They were precise designs, as if a gigantic artistic force was sculpting from the depths. From the fissures emanated a golden light that pulsed like a heart. The crowd recoiled in panic, but found they couldn't move beyond a certain point. There were no physical barriers. Their bodies simply refused to go any further, as if an invisible, magnetic force held them in a circle around me. "My God," someone whispered. "What is she?" I smiled, and I know my smile must have been terrible to see. "I am the memory of the earth," I said, my voice echoing with harmonics that seemed to come from the very stones beneath our feet. "I am the anger of forgotten ancestors. I am Pachamama speaking through human flesh." Carla, who had been at the center of the crowd with her megaphone, was now leaning against a car, her eyes wide with absolute terror. You're not human," she whispered. "I am more human than you will ever be," I replied. "Because I remember where we came from. I remember that we are children of the earth, not its owners." The plants in the pots in the windows of the surrounding apartments began to grow wildly. Vines emerged from cracks in the asphalt, wrapping around the parked cars. Flowers sprouted from the concrete as if it were fertile soil. In a matter of minutes, the entire street had been transformed into a wild, otherworldly garden. "Please," begged one of the mothers who had joined the crowd, "don't hurt our children." I looked at her, a middle-aged woman with eyes full of tears and genuine fear. "Hurt your children?" I repeated. "I protected your children. Every time they mocked me, every time they humiliated me, I could have fought back. You have no idea how many times I held myself back." I walked toward Carla, who tried to back away but found that her legs had turned to stone up to her knees. Not literally, but she was so terrified she couldn't move. "Carla," I said, my voice now soft but loaded with power. "You wanted to meet the Bolivian witch. You wanted to know about my evil powers. So let me show you something." I touched her forehead with the tip of my finger. Instantly, her eyes rolled back and she fell to her knees. But not in pain, in revelation. Because through that touch, I showed her everything. I showed her the pain of being constantly ridiculed and marginalized. I showed her the loneliness of carrying a secret that could destroy everything. I showed her the weight of having destructive power and fighting every day not to use it. When she came to her senses, tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. We didn't know." "Now you do." Dr. Rojas had approached cautiously, Elena at his side. Both watched with a mixture of fascination and respectful terror. "Ximena," Dr. Rojas said carefully, "are you in control?" I looked at him and smiled, this time a genuine smile, not a threatening one. For the first time in my life, I am completely in control. And it was true. The energy that had been such a burden for so long now flowed through me like a perfectly regulated electric current. I could feel it, direct it, shape it at will. It was like finally finding the key to a door that had been locked my entire life. "What are you going to do now?" Elena asked, her voice small and frightened. I looked at my mother, this woman who had sacrificed so much to protect me, who had carried the weight of my secret for 16 years. "I'm going to do what I should have done all along," I said. "I'm going to stop hiding." I held my hands out to the sides, palms down. The energy flowed through me and into the earth, but this time not destructively. Instead of creating cracks and causing tremors, I began to heal. The holes in the asphalt closed up, but left behind decorative patterns that looked like elaborate street art. The plants that had grown wild reorganized themselves into hanging gardens on the facades of buildings, transforming our dull street into something magical and alive. The broken window in our apartment repaired itself, the glass reconstituting itself as if time were turning back. "That's impossible," someone in the crowd murmured. "No," I said. "This is what happens when we stop fighting nature and start working with it." But I knew this was only the beginning. I had a choice to make, and that choice would define not only my future, but potentially the future of many others. I could stay in Barcelona, try to live a normal life knowing what I now knew about myself. I could continue pretending to be just a teenager with some strange talents. Or I could fully accept my nature and use my powers for the purpose they were created. "Dr. Rojas," I said, turning to him, "you said there are others like me." "Yes. Not many and scattered around the world. But yes." "And they're all hiding? They're all pretending to be normal?" "Most of them, yes. The modern world isn't kind to those who are different." I looked around at the crowd that had come to confront me. Some still looked terrified, but others, especially the younger ones, watched me with something that looked like admiration. "Maybe it's time to change that," I said. Elena approached, her eyes still red from crying. "Mija, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending to be less than I am. And most of all, I'm tired of seeing others like me suffering in silence." Dr. Rojas understood immediately. "You want to reveal them. You want the world to know that people like you exist." "Not just that. I want to find them, teach them, help them understand that they're not monsters or freaks. They're guardians of something humanity has forgotten, the connection to the very earth that sustains us." I felt Pachamama stirring below, not with anger now, but with approval, as if she were smiling. "Alin warmi, kunan kalari." "Well, woman, now begin." "But it will be dangerous," Elena warned. "There are people who won't understand, who will try to hurt you." "Let them try," I said, and this time my voice carried a confidence I had never felt before. "I am a daughter of the earth, and the earth protects her daughters." Carla, who had remained on her knees since I touched her, finally stood up. Her face was transformed. There was no more malice there, only a deep understanding. "Ximena," she said, her voice hoarse. "When you touched me, I felt everything. All the pain we caused you. How can you forgive us?" "Because holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die," I replied. "And because I now understand that you acted out of fear of the unknown. Fear is natural. Hate is a choice." The crowd began to slowly disperse. Some left in silence, still processing what they had witnessed. Others approached to apologize, to touch the plants that had miraculously sprouted from the concrete, to try to understand what had really happened. David was one of the last to leave. "Ximena," he said hesitantly, "are you still going?" "Back to school." I smiled at him. This sweet boy who had tried to defend me even when he didn't understand what he was defending me from. "For now, yes. But things will be different now." "Different how?" "You'll see." When we were finally alone, Elena, Dr. Rojas, and me, we sat on the sidewalk in front of our building, now decorated with impossible gardens that had sprouted from my energy. "What now?" Elena asked. "Now we learn," Dr. Rojas said. "Ximena needs to train, to fully understand her powers, to learn to control them in all situations." "And then?" I asked. "Then, if you really want to follow this path, we'll start looking for others. And when we find them, you'll teach them what you've learned." I looked up at the sky, where the storm clouds were dissipating, revealing a golden sunset. I felt a peace I had never experienced before. The peace of finally knowing who I was and having the courage to be it. "There's one last thing," I said. "I want my story to be told. I want people like me anywhere in the world to know that they're not alone, Dr. Rojas smiled. I think that can be arranged. That night, for the first time in 16 years, I slept without nightmares. And in my dreams, I heard voices. Not just Pachamama, but others. Voices of women and men scattered across the world, people like me who were beginning to awaken, to understand that they were not alone. The earth was calling her children back, and I would be the one to guide them home. 6 months later, our story went viral on the internet. The video of what happened on that street in Barcelona was seen by millions of people. Some said it was a computer trick, others that it was an elaborate hoax. But for those who knew the truth, for those who carried the same weight that I carried, it was a beacon in the darkness. I received messages from all over the world. From a girl in Japan who caused earthquakes when she cried. From a man in Iceland who could wake dormant volcanoes. From a woman in Brazil who made the Amazon grow where she walked. One by one, we began to find each other. One by one, we began to understand that we weren't monsters. We were the Earth's own response to a world that had forgotten how to live in harmony with her. And as I write this, sitting in my new office in Barcelona, a space we've turned into a sanctuary and school for people like us, I can feel Pachamama pulsing beneath me. Not with anger now, but with hope. Because finally, her children are coming. Home. My name is Ximena Condori. I am Bolivian, 16 years old, and I am the first of a new generation of guardians of the earth. And our story is just beginning. Ximena's story shows us that sometimes what we consider a curse can actually be a gift. Leave us a rating from 0 to 10 for this story in the comments. Your opinions are very important to us. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our supernatural stories. See you next time.